We finally made it to chapter 6 of Thom Rainer's book, I Will. I hope you've been reading and discussing the information and the implications of this book. The information found in these pages can be easily embraced or they can be dismissed. A difficult and honest question that all of us need to ask is this: where do I fit into this larger story? He opens the chapter with a story about Uncle Jess, who was described as a generous man who took great joy in giving. That's a very powerful statement. And people's lives were changed because of Uncle Jess and his generosity. When Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, little would the gospel writer have known how powerfully it would impact generations of Christians over the next 2,000 years. How often do we hear of an audience at church talk about the morning's sermon or the preacher being astonishing? They pointed out the fact that Jesus taught as one having authority, not like the religious leaders of the day. And his message was not just about salvation. Jesus tells the hearers not to collect treasures for themselves here on earth, but rather to invest in the things of heaven that will not be stolen or destroyed. He says this in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. In this passage, one might think that Jesus is against having a savings account, which is basically storing up treasure on earth. But Jesus is focusing on the real issue of the heart, because he says this: wherever your treasure is, there will be your heart also. They say you can tell more about a person's heart by looking at his checkbook and his calendar than by anything else. These two personal items are filled with records of our priorities. Since Jesus spent so much time talking about our relationship with money, why has the subject of finances become a taboo in the church? Some say it's because discussing money is going to drive guests away, so avoid it. Or critics might point to the extravagant lifestyles of some high-profile preachers. But Rainer goes on to hit us right in the forehead with some information. He says in the American church, there are members who have embraced an improper attitude toward their possessions. He mentions a scenario of members withholding funds when they don't like something that's happening at the church. Or maybe they give only to the ministries that fit their definition of what the church should be doing. Rainer says this is evidence of a consumer-driven mindset. So, what are we to do? First, we can't think of the funds that we're giving as our funds. Remember that the act of giving is essentially an act of letting go, and we let go of that which God already owns. Next, giving ought to be done cheerfully, not under compulsion. The Apostle Paul also writes about a person's spiritual growth being in direct relationship with their generous giving. He talks about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. It's that passage about sowing and reaping. Paul certainly addresses our motive in giving, not out of a legal obligation and not to be done reluctantly. How can one become a more generous giver? Well, make your giving a matter of prayer. Recognize that God is not a God of limitations. Remember, He has the resources and is the owner of everything. Then Rainer just challenges us to do something radical. Just do it. Give. Our obedience to God is directly related to our giving. Discuss with your small group why some members have developed a consumer mindset in the church. How does that affect giving to the church? Maybe read through the Sermon on the Mount to discover all the verses that relate to money, they relate to wealth, or relate to generosity. Evaluate your personal giving. Is it from the heart? Do you prepare your giving on Saturday? Or do you look in your wallet when the offertory starts? Is your giving done joyfully? Do you see giving as an act of worship to God, who is a God who gave His only begotten Son? Is your giving done sacrificially? Do you drop a 20 in the plate, or do you seriously aim toward a tithe of your income? Is your giving under compulsion? Do you give because it is expected, or because it is a reflection of your gratitude to God? Is your giving done regularly? Do you give only when you are present, or does your money skip church when you do? Online giving is a great way to give regularly. Does your giving come with strings attached? I hope you'll not have this attitude, the attitude of a consumer-driven member that Rainer talks about in his book. How can you develop a proper attitude toward money and toward giving? I hope that when you get together with your small group, that you will look forward to discussing the details and the implications of this chapter. Thank you for watching this video, and may God bless your discussion.